going on, everyone? So in today's video, I'm going to be sharing what I learned from spending 85 minutes with Sean Foley the other day. So yesterday I had the opportunity to be able to listen to Sean and be able to ask him a few questions. It was part of a golf group that I run with my golf coaching mentor, a guy named Jeff Smith. But we help coaches become better coaches essentially. And so Jeff knows Sean, and he was able to bring him on to the call, which is really awesome. I've never had the opportunity to talk to Sean before, but I figured that I would kind of share with you guys what I learned from that call. So kind of start with the basics here. Obviously, I've got to do all the YouTube stuff. So if you're new to the channel, please, if you enjoy this video, leave a like. And if you want to see more videos like this, normally I'm focusing on junior golf specifically and helping junior golfers develop to play college golf. So if that's something you're interested in, please go ahead and subscribe to the channel. I'm just going to show you when I publish new videos every single week. So anyway, let's go ahead and jump right into it. So if you guys don't know, if you've been living under a rock or something like that, Sean Foley was Tiger Woods' third professional swing coach. Sean had the awesome opportunity of being able to work with Tiger after the whole 2009 incident happened for Tiger. So it was a really tough situation. But as you guys may or may not know, my biggest thing, the thing that I really focus on is practice, right? And stats. So it's like, how do our numbers impact our way that we should practice? And so, you know, some of these more old school guys, it's really interesting to look at and be like, how did they practice? You know, what did they do differently than, you know, just kind of everyday players? And so I think a lot of the times when players look at a guy like Tiger, it's almost kind of presented as like the model workhorse of just somebody who's just, you know, perpetually works out, perpetually working on his game. And that's something that I notice a lot with junior golfers specifically, is they will just grind all day. Like they'll, you know, go for weeks and weeks and weeks, just like grinding on their swing or something like that. And they're not really knowing if they're improving, because they're just going out there hitting balls. They don't actually know if it's contributing to them shooting lower scores. And so it's always a question for me of, how do I optimize a player's practice, and how do I get them focused on the right areas of their game? Now, you know, I do that with data. So I have all my students track their stats, and then I have a sizable amount of data where I can make a decision and say, okay, cool, here's how I want you to practice. Here's the way that I want you to format this. And then I can actually measure their progress and results over time. Now, obviously back in the day, you know, people didn't have that much data, you know, even when back 2009, 2010, sure, there was, you know, kind of the beginning of strokes gained, but for the most part, people are still trying to figure out TrackMan, which is obviously, you know, an important kind of benchmark here. In my opinion, I think that, you know, that's obviously really, really important, and that's really great stuff. I just like to go a little bit past that and kind of look at big picture data numbers, because personally, I believe that if I know your data and I can use your data to predict what you're shooting right now, well, then I know if we change what you're shooting right, or what your data says, you know, what your particular skills are showing, then we're going to improve the scores. And so that's how I coach my students. But again, if you have the opportunity to talk to someone who has been around the GOAT, you know, the greatest golfer of all time, you know, probably next to Jack Nicklaus, what did he do? That was the number one question that I wanted to ask. I kind of started off, I was just like, okay, well, like, how did he practice, you know, kind of in all these scenarios? Now, the first kind of caveat here is, you know, when Sean was around Tiger, it was post, you know, kind of like all the chaos. He wasn't invincible anymore. Yeah, all sorts of crazy stuff going on. And so for him, it was still kind of, you know, an interesting thing to see. So I wanted to share this with you guys, because what he said was, he's like, Tiger would get up in the morning, do his workout, you know, pretty standard stuff. And then what do you do is you go to the golf course and you hit balls for, you know, or he'd like work on a particular area of his game for about 45-ish minutes. One of the things that he said that I was like very interested in, I thought was very interesting, is he would do things very, very slowly. So he would have a lot of like slower reps, time in between hitting shots, working on a particular feel or something like that in slow motion, are all things that Tiger would do. And he was also very, very aware of when he was mentally checked out, where he's just like, all right, cool, I've done enough, take a rest. So you know, go back to the golf cart. And the other thing that he would do is you know, when you do that, he'd go and play 6 holes or something along those lines. So again, he would have a little bit of practice, you know, 35, 45 minutes, work on something, whether it's, wedge play or chipping or putting or, hitting longer shots. But you do that and then you go play golf. And then you come back to work on something else for, 45 minutes or so, take a break, go play again. And it was kind of that was his process for kind of like rinsing and repeating his practice. And so it's a little bit different than I approach it, but it was kind of fascinating because, again, one of the things I always emphasize to students is if you're out there for, working on something for 3, 4, 5 hours, like it's just way too much. If you hit golf balls for 3 hours, like that's just insane. It's just way too much. The quality of your reps goes way down. So typically when I'm talking to students, when I'm working with them, the most we're ever going to spend in a particular area is about 45 minutes. Sometimes it's less, to be quite honest, but a lot of the time we do kind of live in that kind of 45-minute range, especially around the ball striking. That's kind of be the most intensive. Ball striking, putting, both are going to be around kind of 45-minute benchmarks there. Drivers are a little bit shorter than that. Chipping is a little bit shorter than that, but that's kind of the gist of it. And it's kind of interesting to look at a guy like Tiger that you would think it's like, oh, we're just out here 8 hours a day, every single day, just grinding. And it's a lot more methodical than you might otherwise think. So that was the first thing I want to share with you guys is just like, if you got a junior golfer, they're out there grinding every single day and they don't really have a plan for what they're doing. That's not what the best players in the world are doing. It's plain and simple. The best players in the world are a lot more methodical. And the greatest player ever is a lot more methodical than that. And so that's part of the reason why I spend so much time helping my students on that particular area, is because if you just go from like 3 hours of garbage or not really, high quality, high focus performance to, let's say 20 minutes of focused reps, 30 minutes of focused reps, 40 minutes of focused reps, that's a lot more realistic. That's a lot easier to do. And odds are, even if you've got a younger kid, maybe they're 10, 11, 12, 13 years old, they can probably still focus on something for 40 minutes. That's still kind of like within range. And then the other side of that coin is you got to go and play golf. And just like keep in mind here, even if we're in a cart, like let's say we're playing really fast, we're in a cart, I always talk about a ratio of at least 1-to-1 play to practice. So we're going to go work on something. We want to go see how it translates on the golf course. So you can kind of see Tiger's following that same model as well, where he's practicing a little bit, go to the golf course, see how it performs. Go back, work on something else, go to the golf course, see how it performs. Now, he might be doing that the same day. Typically, I'm going to split that up for players where we're going to have one day we're focused on practice, next day we're focused on play, and so on and so forth. But again, big picture here, that is a format that you guys want to stick to. And so if you have got a junior golfer where they're just going day after day after day working on stuff, but they don't go play golf for a score, that's going to like run into some problems. They're not going to perform as well. If they're playing every single day and they're just like mentally gassed, odds are you can actually do addition by subtraction, just cut out some of the stuff, get them a little bit more focused in their practice. Make sure that you understand their stats. Again, this is why I collect this stuff. Make sure you understand their stats so you can organize that practice effectively. But less is more. Is pretty much the takeaway there. Now, there are two other big things that I heard that I thought were quite interesting. Next one is, so one of the things I was trying to pull out is just like, how did Tiger, go about his business on the golf course when he was like playing around a golf? And what Sean said was he would play a ton of worst ball, which is actually something I want to go test out, over the coming weeks. Because if you don't know what worst ball is, it's pretty much you hit 2 shots and you play the worst one. And what that really forces you to do is it forces you to understand like how bad shots you can hit are. And it requires you to be a lot more disciplined to actually to do that, to play for a score. You have a tee shot. It's not how do I like thread the needle up there? It's like I got to hit 2 balls and both of them have to be usable. I can hit 2 approach shots. Both of them have to be usable. I have to hit, 2 chip shots. Both of them have to be usable where, same thing with lag putting and so on and so forth. Both of these shots have to be usable. If I make a 15-footer, I have to validate it. So it really cuts off your opportunity to make a lot of kind of like random birdies. But the other thing it does, though, is it really forces you to be a lot more conservative in your decision making. And so it's something I want to test out, because the caveat to that is if you go out there and shoot a million, that could be a little bit of emotionally demoralizing. But on the other side of that, though, if you go out there and you can shoot, 78, 75 on a worst ball, especially if you're a junior golfer, like that's incredible. And when you go out there and just know and be like, even if I hit a bad shot, like I'm going to be totally fine. And you get very, very comfortable just kind of seeing the window that your ball is going to come out, the amount of curve your ball is going to have. You're playing at a very high level. So that's another one that I want to share with you guys. This is maybe something if you've never done that before. You want a little bit of challenge. I would recommend this to someone who is already shooting probably 75, 74 on average. So we're talking about a plus handicap realistically. I would not do this if you're shooting 90 on average because you're going to go out there and shoot 110. Don't do that. But if you've got good control of your ball flight, you feel like you're shooting solid numbers and you want to, get better and challenge yourself, worst ball is a great game to play. The last one that I'm going to share with you guys that I'm very excited to try out, that I thought was super cool, is he would play essentially 3 balls on one hole. So he'd play from the tips, from the middle, and from the front tees. You get to play 18 holes in like 6 holes. And if you think about that, depending on how far you hit it, you're going to be hitting completely different shots. So I'll give myself as an example. I hit the ball reasonably far. I hit it about 320. So I'm going to play a lot of golf courses. They're going to be like 7,000 plus yards. That's going to be kind of where I should be playing. And so if I'm hitting driver, I might have a situation where I hit driver, pitching wedge or 8-iron or something like that, depending on how long the hole is. I might play a 600-yard par 5, where it might be hard to get to the par 5 and 2. And those kinds of scenarios, right? Then I'm going to play from the middle, where it's like I'm probably going to be hitting myself to maybe have a sand wedge or a lob wedge. I'm going to have to get good at those shots. And maybe instead of hitting driver off the tee, I might be hitting 2 irons off the tee because maybe a bottleneck or something like that. And then from the women's tees, or like from all the way up the front tees, it's like, okay, well, now I'm looking at driving every single green. And if I miss the green, then my chip shots have to be really solid. And then I'm looking at like, okay, I'm going to make a lot of birdies. And so, looking at that, it's like you might have a card where you're shooting 64, 69 and maybe 74. And as kind of a way to evaluate yourself. But it kind of hit me. I was just like, man, if you can do that, then you really have to have all the shots. You got to have all these different scenarios. And you also have to have extra work as far as the psychological toll of the toll of the decision making that goes into each one of those shots. Because if you're talking about, okay, cool, we've got drivable par 4 versus like, hey, lay up to this spot or hit your driver and play. Like those are completely different scenarios. Your second shots and your third shots, and so on and so forth, are completely different scenarios. So that's one I'm very excited to start testing out. I'm gonna have to figure out how to collect data on it because every stats tool is pretty much lets you take in one round. I think I'm gonna have to take it on my scorecard and then put it in afterwards, but it should be pretty quick to test. I want to see everything that I do. I always look at it from a perspective of like, does this cause better performance? So if I go out there and I start doing worse ball and I get worse, I'm not going to do worse ball. I'm not going to recommend my students do worse ball. That said, if I'd start doing worse ball and my scores come way down, I'd be like, okay, well, maybe we do that as a default. I think the 3-ball thing is cool. You probably can't do that if you got a busy golf course. But if you come out at the end of the day, I know a lot of junior golfers end up doing this where it's like really slow. Maybe you're just a single, maybe you're walking and you're just like, man, I got 5 sums ahead of me of, guys who can't play golf. What should I do? This is one that I'd recommend you try out. You probably got to mark your balls differently so you know which one's which. But play 3 different tees. Play a front tee, back tee, and a middle tee, and see what you can shoot on each one of those cards. Because essentially you'd be playing 54 holes. If you played all 18 holes, you'd be playing 54 holes over the course of 18 holes. It require a lot of mental discipline and focus. So again, this is not something that I would necessarily recommend if you don't want to challenge yourself. I'm expecting to be challenged by this. But I just wanted to share with you guys a few things that I learned from that time with Sean. And hopefully you guys can kind of implement some of this stuff as well in your practice and your mentality. So hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, please leave a like. And if you want to see more stuff like that, go ahead and subscribe to the channel as well. I'll see you guys in the next one.